Welcome back to Button Mash on WCRD 91.3 FM, the Pulse of Ball State. Listen up, folks. We've got a great interview with Adam Condra of Good Games Writing and 151 Magazine. Am I saying that right, Mr. Condra? 151, is it?
I've referred to it as 151.
151.
But Kyle he didn't put that in the style guide, so I would say just go for whatever feels right.
Excellent. Folks, Adam Condren has been a contributor to Good Games Writing and is now the curator of this popular publication on the internet focused on sort of bringing a spotlight to the excellent writing of various journalists, editors around the games journalism industry. Writers like Chris Kohler, Russ Pitts, and Robert Rath. My personal favorite description, I don't know if you wrote this particular installment on the blog, was Russ Pitts is the Indiana Jones of games writers.
I did.
You did?
I wrote all of the entries for the Writer of the Year candidates in there, so
that's brilliant.
Yeah, I had some fun with that, and it's funny because like Rob Rath is known for wearing a fedora and taking like adventure-y photos because he lives abroad
in China,
and does that sort of thing.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit. Let's just start off with a brief history of what is Good Games Writing and how did it come to you as a professional contributor to writing like this?
Well, professional is a very generous word. I would say Good Games Writing has been around for 2 years as of this month, and I have been a part of it since August of 2012. Kyle McIntosh is the guy who started it. He's the man of big ideas in all the projects that we do together, and he started this website because I think if you remember back about 2 years ago, that's when Polygon and the Penny Arcade Report started up. And I don't want to put too much of this attitude on them, but there was this very reactionary sort of declaration in the way they both came to fruition that games writing is broken, or just to be a little bit more generous, there are big problems in games writing that need to be addressed, or things that can be done better. And I know, Ben Kuchera, the guy who used to run the Penny Arcade Report, is now with Polygon. And I remember he sort of recanted some of the things he said about the state of games writing when Penny Arcade got started up, or when the report got started up. But so yeah, there was this big moment where it was sort of like in the front of everybody's minds that games writing is just regurgitating press releases and reviewing games on a 7 to 10 scale, and nobody's really thinking critically and really trying to make the most out of this artistic medium in terms of criticism and investigative storytelling and reporting.
I love how you say
to their
7 to
credit,
10.
I don't want to denigrate them at all, because they both of those outlets did great jobs, but Good Games Writing kind of came alongside that kind of attitude, and the mission was, no, that's not the case, and we're going to dig and find everything we can to share to y'all to prove that there's a lot more to games writing than the mainstream someone who's just reading basic websites and magazines might assume.
Yeah, getting away from cinematic and compelling, as those keywords have become so overused and gluttonous. So getting onto 151 Magazine, which is really something I want to focus on for this interview. What is the ultimate goal behind getting adults and kids to talk productively about video games? Because even now, I'm glad to say I'm an example of this. I recommended my father, my 58-year-old father, read a couple of the articles you linked to on the latest post on Good Games Writing, and he has opened up to me more about games writing. He read, I believe it was Simon Parkin's article on guns in the game industry, and that really opened his eyes. So is that sort of the goal here, or are we looking for something different?
Well, it's interesting when it comes to like bridging a conversation between gamers and non-gamers, because you never know what's going to interest someone. My own dad, like, I come from a family that they were tolerant, but they were not friendly towards video games being in the house. So it's been kind of funny sort of sharing what I share with my family to see what they'll get interested in, which hasn't been much. But I think that as far as 151 goes, and with kids, you have an opportunity there to sort of grow the conversation as you want. And That's Kyle's deal. He's putting that together, so I can't really speak for what his goals are, but I think it's always his intention to sort of change the discourse, as he puts it. Like that's his mantra, that's his goal in everything he does, is to bring people together in conversation where they might not have previously met.
Jumping off of that, like, yeah, where has the industry failed, necessitating your own action? Obviously, publications who became known for, I say again, the cinematic and compelling buzzwords, has the actual production of games industry failed in some respects that we need this good games writing now?
I wouldn't say that the game industry or the games writing industry was ever failing. I would not ever say that. Even amongst the people who said that it was broken and needed changing, they do great work, and you can find great work even at sort of the larger, long-standing outlets like IGN and Game Informer and GameSpot. Like those guys, those writers are still doing great work. I think the problem is there was a lot of animosity between readers and writers for a long time, and there still is some of that because there's this misconception about reviewers getting paid to review games favorably or unfavorably or whatever. That stuff isn't going to go away, and the other problem that's facing games writers is that game development public relations follows games writing very closely and takes its cues from what people are saying to then market their games with. That's why words like compelling and cinematic and visceral became such awful buzzwords. It's because that's what games writers were using to describe games, and games marketers took that language and used it to sell their games. And this is a cycle that sort of repeats itself over and over. You're starting to see words like emergent and emotional are getting overused in games marketing and that stuff. So there's this arms race between the way games are talked about and the way games are sold that I think creates that rift there. So to answer your question, I don't think the problem was like changing the conversation so much as digging deep and like finding the really good stuff where it was being written and sort of giving that a soapbox and a sounding board so that more people could share it and more people could read it.
That's a really great answer. So I read through the list of games that Kyle had posted that he wanted to see featured primarily in 151 magazine, or at least the first issue or two. What do games like Brothers, Tales of Two Sons, Minecraft, or even the soon-to-be juggernaut Titanfall have to teach us, and not just us, but like people outside the mainstream readers of games writing? Are they really related to the topic of growing up? I know Kyle might have a better answer for that, but I would like your opinion on how some of that relates to each other.
I guarantee you Kyle has a better answer to that. But I would say, as far as Titanfall is concerned, I wouldn't really know where to start. I think that kids. I teach elementary school, so like one thing I've observed is that kids want two things if they're going to talk to an adult. They want either the adult to be into what they're into, or they want to be allowed to see and play and read the same stuff that the adult is into. So Titanfall could be one of those cases where like it's something all the adults are talking about. So how do we bring kids into that conversation when it's a game that probably isn't appropriate or great for their mental capacities? So that I think is a more challenging idea to sort of find a way to talk about Titanfall, because there will be lots of kids whose parents just say, yeah, go crazy, play that and stuff. But I think with Brothers and with Minecraft specifically, you've got probably two of the best games to start a conversation with children about games, because Minecraft hands down is the most popular thing among kids of strictly anything I can think of. I could go on at length about like how inspiring and how great that game is, and how much it is like brought to children in terms of providing them with a creative exercise.
Do kids in your elementary class?
I also would be fine if I never heard another word about it again.
I think that answers the question you're about to ask, Joe.
Yeah, it's something that my students talk about constantly, all day. And then the other side of that, like Minecraft is very easy to recommend to children for obvious reasons, because it's a big sandbox and an adventure, and it has very specific rule sets that kids are good at learning and adapting to. and creating things. And then with brothers, you've got something that is completely on the opposite of the spectrum, because it teaches children about narrative, and it teaches children about communication through aesthetics. And it also exists in this very prominent literary tradition of sort of the darker, like Hans Christian Andersen, Grimm's fairy tale kind of thing. So those two games in particular are great ways to introduce kids to like the disparate strengths of video games and what they can provide us in terms of entertainment and I guess mental engagement.
Yeah. So Adam, you're kind of in an interesting spot here where you're obviously incredibly knowledgeable on video game industry, but also kind of you mold young minds. You teach elementary kids. How many instances have you had with like kind of laying these things out and explaining them and kind of bridging the gap between video games, kids, and like their parents? Do you think of any specific case at all?
Yeah, I remember when I got the teaching job I have now. The first time I met some of the parents, I was talking to them about Portal 2, because this was 3 years ago when I got this job, and they were talking about how they played Portal 2 with their kids in co-op mode so that they could like solve those puzzles together and stuff. And then it's different case by case. Obviously, I don't have any parents who are straight up against video games or have the same hangups about video games that my parents did, or like the kind of cliches you hear in the mainstream. But I also have other parents and other families who don't really pay a lot of attention to basically like what video games are good for children to consume.
Right. They don't really like help them in their
ratings and complexity.
Right. Have you ever made like any recommendations?
Yeah,
I doubt you've ever had like a homework assignment that you've given like go play.
I think they're elementary kids. Yeah.
Well, no, I mean I purposely Minecraft isn't really my jam, so it's easy for me to kind of stay away from that, and not because I don't want to. Number one, once I leave school, I kind of just want to have that time to myself, and number two, I think that I need to stay out of the kids' like free time and entertainment. So I'll talk to them about Minecraft and about the things they're building, but I don't want to get too involved, because I think that's something that they should have for themselves and just kind of learn to develop on their own. I did have a project a couple years ago where have y'all heard of the game Pushmo on 3DS?
I have not. No.
Okay, so it's a puzzle game where you stand in front of a bunch of geometric shapes on a plane, and you can grab the shapes and pull them out up to 3 steps. And then the game is about grabbing these shapes, pushing them, and pulling them in to create platforms and staircases that you can use to get to the top, to the goal. So, and the whole thing is completely geometric. It's used with very simple, like, right angle polygonal shapes, and you can create your own puzzles. So I showed this to the kids a couple years ago and we did like a basic geometry assignment where I had them go home with a bunch of graph paper, and I said, I want you to make your own Pushmo designs, and then I'll make them in the game, and we can test them out. So I gave them out to them in levels. I said, I want you to make me a puzzle on the graph paper that requires 3 steps to finish, and then 5 steps, and then 7 steps. And then the farthest any one of them got without just like, I guess, brute forcing their design was 13 steps. And it was this really nice example where I was like using a game to inform something that they had learned in the classroom,
that's the next Peter Molyneux. He's like, no, 13 steps.
Yeah, and I mean, I didn't have to solicit that. I didn't order that at all. It was just the student just ran away with her designs because she got so into it. And like I try to not talk about the games writing aspect of my life too much around the kids, because I don't want, I like keeping those spheres separate. And
yeah.
I don't want to be the sort of gimmicky teacher that like wants to be hip and like bring things into the classroom. But there are moments where we can do things like that, and it's really rewarding and really cool. So
Kyle mentioned that you are a contributor to the first issue of 151 magazine. I definitely don't want to spoil whatever material you've written, but jumping off of the aspects that we talked about with personal relationships with games and how they relate to a familial relationship, Could you share a glimpse of your article's focus? Is there an aspect of it that directly relates to what we've talked about today?
As it's written now, no, I would say. First of all, the piece I've written is just a draft, and Kyle's editing it right now. So in between now and when it actually gets released in the magazine, it could be drastically different depending on what he wants changed. But as it is now, the piece is mainly a meditation on escapism, which is something that kids don't think about when they're playing games. They like to play games because there's a fun mechanic or because they can do something that like Minecraft allows them to build something, and like that's where the power fantasy is. Whereas when I was a kid, I was playing things like Pokemon and Star Fox and Final Fantasy because those were the games that kind of like took me the farthest away from whatever I was doing in life, And it wasn't because I was depressed or anything like that. It was just I wanted to see and sort of interact with the most fantastical piece of code ever. Like that's what got me into video games. That's what excited me. And so the piece I wrote for 151 is it's about another game that I recently got, I would say, addicted to, like very just compulsively playing every day and thinking about it constantly. And it's completely different. It's not in the same genre at all as Final Fantasy or any of the previous games I mentioned, but it provided a new kind of escapism to me based on my age and my deteriorating physical condition from like when I was a kid. So I won't spoil it anymore beyond that, but it just the piece I wrote is sort of talking about how our priorities in the games we play and in the things that they can give us to sort of like satisfy our creative energies can change over time in really surprising ways, because the game in question is something that I never would have given the time of day to if I had been a child. But now I got really sucked into it last year, and I'm a fan of that franchise now, so that's what I talk about in the piece, and we'll see if that's what ends up getting published. But that's what it is now.
So going back to the seven, I believe it's 7 writers that have been nominated for the Good Games Writing Writer of the Year, I suppose is what we're calling it. Mm-hmm. What separates a remarkable games writer from one who's definitely left out of consideration? What common threads are we seeing between people like Russ Pitts, Lee Alexander, and Robert Rath?
Yeah, so when Kyle and I started deliberating, it was probably early December, I want to say, and we had a short list of about, I think, 15 people, and they were the ones that in our minds were just sort of head and shoulders above everybody else over the past year, because they were consistently insightful or did good work in whatever they were doing. And as we whittled it down, what became really important to the core 7 people that we wanted was how good they were at what they were writing, because not all of the writers that we nominated had much cross-pollination with each other. You had people like Rath who have a weekly column, people like Russ who only wrote features, and then people like Jason Schreier who did he does investigative news and news posts for Kotaku, and Lee Alexander who does a little bit of everything. And so we started to prioritize people who were really, really good and the best at their particular brand of games writing, and also who was the most prolific. So we had a number of people that were nominated last year that we wanted, they were in the conversation and we debated about them for a while. But ultimately we didn't go with them because they weren't as prolific, or they might've been in a transition period this year, or some sort of reason like that. And so the 7 we came up with are really, we think, the best at what they're doing and the best in their fields. And then hopefully I explained this well in the blog post. It's just, highlighting each of their strengths and why they are the best at that thing. Like if I read a Rath article, I know I'm going to learn something that I didn't know before. And if I read a Pitts article, I know that I'm going to get a story that I wouldn't get anywhere else. And with someone like Simon Parkin, I'm going to read something that I might not have thought about as far as, how games sort of interact with culture at large. And it's going to be really, really, really written very well, because Parkin's amazing at that sort of stuff. So it was just, we slowly sort of culled the list until we figured out, well, these are the people who are the best at what they are doing right now, and they're doing it at a rate that that hasn't been matched by anybody else this year. So it was basically volume of output and quality of output put together that gave us these 7.
That's a very excellent description of what it's taking, and certainly we are so interested to see who truly wins, because quite frankly, I think Indiana Jones needs to come back after that last movie. I'm the only person who has access to the votes, and I will say that it is a very close race, and everyone has gotten at least one vote. So, and that's the way it was last year. Our winner last year was Colin Campbell, and he won by 2, and everybody else had just 1 vote. Well, there's 3 people in this room right now, and we're not telling who we're voting for. All right. I think that's all we have time for today. You can find Adam Condra and Kyle McIntosh. I should probably learn how to pronounce that. You can find Kyle.
That's a computer.
You can find them at goodgameswriting.com and on the Twitter account, which I believe is still Good Writing VG. Good Writing VG. And there. Do we have a release date made publicly available for the first issue of 151?
I don't know exactly. I know that Kyle is busting his hump putting it together, so I would expect it sometime in the next couple months, hopefully.
To be distributed probably online strictly, I would imagine.
Yeah, and believe you me, we will be letting people know about it.
Absolutely. All right, this has been an episode of Button Mash on WCRD 91.3 FM, The Pulse of Ball State. As always, I am your host, Joseph Knoop, and with me as always has been Lucas Schmidt and Nick Dowell. Adam, besides Good Games Writing and the Twitter account, if people want to find your work and want to support you, is there any place that they can go?
You can find me on Twitter at Condrarian, which is my last name plus RIAN, and as for whatever I'm doing next, my next piece should be in 151, and I've got some other freelance stuff going. So if you want to know what I'm up to, I'll be sort of quarterbacking that stuff on Twitter. So you can find me there, I guess.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Adam.
Thank you. I appreciate it very much.
All right, guys. Have a good weekend, everyone.